You'll hear from these panel of legislators and industry leaders in just a moment. But beforehand, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce you to our facilitator today, Stacy Messier. CIC is a global leader in building and operating innovative ecosystems. They've elevated Stacy Messier to the general manager of New England recently. Stacy joined CIC in March 2022 to lead CIC Providence, which has experienced impressive growth, including the development of a dynamic offshore wind community. Her expanded role marks a significant milestone in CIC's ongoing mission to support and accelerate the growth in innovative startups and enterprises throughout New England and around the world. Stacy will deepen the connection between CIC's New England-based innovation campuses with its global network and oversee growth in the region. We are so thrilled to have Stacy's friendship and so honored to have her attention. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Stacy Messier.
Thank you all so much. I'm a little bit more comfortable with mic in hand, I hope you don't mind. I was gonna say, well, we're all gonna introduce ourselves and then I'll introduce myself last, but thank you very much, Stephen. That was fantastic. I appreciate you so much. So welcome everybody. Give me a moment. I did handwritten notes. I know the year is 2024, but I like things on paper. I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Big handwriter, I know.
If you'll notice, my book says, "Why not?" That is exactly how we're going to roll on this panel today. I hope you're ready. I hope your cranberries are giving you energy, people. All right. So I would love to, first and foremost, thank you all very much for being here today. Raise your hand if this is the first time you've ever attended a Blue Future. Yeah! Give yourselves a round of applause. All right. Look at these gorgeous people. So I'm so excited to see familiar faces as well as new faces. Welcome, everybody. We're happy to have you. And thank you so much for joining us on this fantastic stage today. We're going to talk about that intersection between public policy, entrepreneurship, investing, and quite frankly, our collective future and how we're all investing in getting us there. So let us start all the way down at the far end of the table with Anthony. I'd love for each of you to just tell us who you are, tell us your name so that the people in the audience know how to match your photo with your face and your voice. But also, what I really want you to share with us is like, who are you, what do you do, but how does it fall in line with the blue economy?
Sure. Hi, I'm Anthony Gesualdi. I'm the Associate Vice President for Conservation Policy at the New England Aquarium. I am relatively new at the aquarium, past 6 months. Before that, I was at the State House for about 10 years working in the State Senate. Most of you know the aquarium as a cultural institution dedicated to conservation and education, but we also have a very extensive research wing in the Anderson Cabot Institute, but also within that the Balanced Blue Lab, which is sort of our innovation and tech hub. So we try to sort of use our unique position to show that conservation and economic development are not mutually exclusive topics.
Fantastic. Thank you.
All right. Greetings. My name is Justin Manley. I'm going to try to rattle off a handful of hats that might matter to the conversation. So I am a venture partner in a climate impact fund out of Silicon Valley. I handle our ocean tech portfolio. I also support Oceankind Philanthropy, also out of Silicon Valley. I do live in Kingston. It just so happens that a lot of the work is out of Silicon Valley, and we work on ocean conservation through technology innovation. I'm involved in a handful of startup companies, one out of Woods Hole. Very proudly, we just hired our first full-time employee about 6 weeks ago. Another last month hit $1 billion valuation. So I have quite the spread of...
Give that a round of applause.
Yeah, that's a defense-focused company. And then last but not least, as a volunteer role, I'm the president and board chair of an organization called the Marine Technology Society, which is a global professional society for anyone and everyone, policy, innovation, whatever, involved in the field. A lot of workforce development concerns there.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Haley Bathurst. I am the Director of Business Development for See Ahead and have been with the company for about 3 years. My background is in international development and policy and really in economic development. So previously to being back in Massachusetts in the last year, I was on the Mississippi Gulf Coast running a later stage accelerator program focused on testing in the Gulf of Mexico for later stage ocean technology companies. But I would say that my sweet spot is looking at the intersection between innovation and policy in nascent industries. So really excited to talk with you all today.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm State Representative Kathy Lenatra. I represent the 12th Plymouth District, which is part of Plymouth, where we are now. This is actually my district, and 5 other towns. I'm the co-chair of the Coastal Caucus at the State House. I sit on that with my fellow colleague, Rep. Muratori. And, oh my gosh, and my other fellow colleague, Joan Moschino. I am so sorry.
Not
about
enough
that, Joan.
cranberries. Not enough. Thank you so much.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am Matt Muratori. I am the state representative here for the 1st Plymouth District. That includes the better part of Plymouth, which is the coastal towns further down. I'm just kidding.
I know.
I'm just kidding you. No, I share it with Kathy. But I'm also, I've been the past board chair of the town of Plymouth back in 2010 to 2015 on the Board of Selectmen, and prior to that on the Finance Committee here. So I've been here for a long time. I've seen, such a lot of growth here. But one of the industries that we are really excited about is the blue economy. I'm actually a member of the foundation, the Plymouth Area Economic Foundation with Stephen Cole as well, who's sponsoring this conference today. And it's something we've been talking about, for a decade now, but really in the last 3 or 4 years, really bringing an eye to the subject here in Plymouth. So we're very proud to be here. I'm very honored to be part of this panel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. And I'm Joan Moschino. I'm the state representative from 3rd Plymouth District, which is Hingham, Hull, and Cohasset. And I'm here today. I am the northernmost tip of Plymouth County. And so I sort of bring that other side of its perspective all the way down here, because this is a regional conversation, and I am excited to be part of this particular discussion. A 4th-term legislator, and I'm actually the author of the 2050 Roadmap to Net Zero, which was the basis of the Next Generation Massachusetts climate policy. And the whole point of our net zero goals is to decarbonize our economy. And so this conversation is really at the center of climate, of environment and sustainability, but also economics and our economic development and the innovation that will drive it. So I'm very excited to be here today with you, even though I'm a little far afield.
Really appreciate it. Thank you all so much. We've got diversity up on here from perspective to expertise. This is going to be really exciting. So for our fabulous state representatives, this is definitely a softball, but I think it's a great opportunity for you to share from the local level in terms of Plymouth County. How are we actually enabling? What's the work happening on the ground that helps us enable these blue tech startups that we've heard from today, as well as our future entrepreneurs that we heard from this morning, our wonderful students?
Okay. Well, I'm just deferring because I am far afield. But I will just say that I think that Plymouth and the remarks today by Undersecretary Silva really were, I thought, very interesting. The state is very much thinking about the investments, but the work of it is going to take place at the municipal level, at the local level. And so one of the things that I think that Plymouth, and we heard a little of this in the panel prior to this one, is really that it started all with those assessments. And so when the state was doing was they were starting to fund all of these big programs. And so at the local level, all of us, all of the towns, all these, big city, town, but city-like, Plymouth has depth of staff, but even small communities like Cohasset are doing these vulnerability assessments. And what they're doing is they're actually asking the questions of both assets and vulnerabilities, and then they're starting to do the assessments and then the planning. And so I think from the local perspective, the communities themselves are educating themselves, they're learning about their own communities, and we heard a little bit about in the last panel about this hyper-local data and processing. And then what it's doing is we're feeding that back up into the investments of the state, and that's the synergy. So things like the Seaport Economic Council and how how the state can fund, that's just one example of how the state can fund all of the work that we're doing in here. And the way I like to think about it is a synergy of unlocking the potential. And then it's really up to each community to figure out what is your vulnerability, what is your asset, what do you bring to the table? And that's what's exciting about being here today, because I think that Plymouth really has the opportunity, because they have gravitas, to be an anchor and to really model for the rest of us. And that's just one example. Chapter 91 would be another one, right? To both the access and that we're preserving access to the waterfronts, but also making sure that everything's water dependent. And these are the things that the state's doing that really are going to make sure we're resilient, that we have the resources. And that's the investment that's going to start to do a lot of the unlocking of the economics. I don't know if you guys want to add some of your
Could I
local
actually ask a
examples.
follow-up question that might help you add some color? From a layperson's perspective, what are the outcomes that you're hoping to happen from this work that you're speaking of? I just want to acknowledge the people in the room that are not policymakers, that are not speaking in the same language as you. So tell us a little bit about, like, by doing these assessments, by speaking with these different constituents and organizations and bodies within our government, what do you hope to happen?
Well, I think I agree with everything what Joan has said, and for Plymouth specifically, we started back, a decade or so ago with aquaculture here, and looking at that, and that's when we really started talking about and the blue economy and what it can actually bring economically and for jobs, really. And when Derek Brindisi came as our town manager 3 years ago, and with Stephen Cole as the executive director of the foundation, that's when it really started kicking gear. And again, the town's doing the assessments, but it's more about how it's going to fill important jobs here. And what we realized too, and I think Stephen showed a slide on this too, is that Plymouth is sort of the economic hub of this whole thing. And being the anchor, as you said, Joan, that we have a real opportunity, not just for Plymouth, but for the whole area to develop these great jobs and really build this economy on top of the tourism we already have.
Excellent. Kathy, is there anything you wanted to
I
add?
just wanted to add, thank you to my colleagues, but it's putting us on the map, right? It's not a North Shore focus, it's not a Boston focus, it's putting the South Shore on the map, and I think that's very important. And with all this information that we gather and that we hear, then we can file legislation that's also very helpful, which I've been able to do with the New England Aquarium, file some legislations this year, which is very helpful to this district specific, but actually the whole South Shore.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. This is for everybody. From that state and federal perspective, what are some of the current opportunities you're most excited about that are out there and available to startups today?
All right, I guess I'll start. So there's a lot of organizations to partner with, both on the state and the federal level. We at the aquarium are often find ourselves partnering with NOAA, DOE, even the White House directly, through grant programs for research and innovation. Us at the aquarium, through the Balanced Blue Lab, we fund the Blue Swell program and Upswell with See Ahead, which are incubators and investor educated programs, which provide great access to the business community broadly, back to partners who know the blue tech and blue economy space and the public sector space.
So just a quick reaction though. So what you've talked about there is a lot more, frankly, private sector driver than it is public sector. So my apologies for being slightly direct. As an investor and an entrepreneur, there are very few public sector mechanisms that actually matter to a startup and an entrepreneur, right? The distance between large scale, certainly federal, to some extent state, local can have an impact, right? But connectivity between public sector and that actual startup creativity is really, really hard. The flip side at the moment in the quote unquote blue economy, whatever we decide that means, is that at the federal level, certainly, and at state level, you see the shaping of macro level things that help folks like me believe that markets will come to be, right? That will help us either invest in or non-dilutively help a startup grow, right? So the connectivity can be very, very fuzzy, but the outcomes, can be quite real.
That's an important point. Haley, I wonder if you want to speak to how SIA Head acts as this interesting intermediary, because I feel like you all do a wonderful job at accelerating what I would call accessibility through your programs and assorted other things.
Yeah, and I'll start from the top, which is that the fact that we are all in this room having this conversation is a really good sign, right? I mean, I think we've seen from a bunch of grants that have come out over the last couple of years, and a lot of other language that's being used universally in conversations like this, in rooms like this, we no longer have to convince everybody that this is a problem, right? We don't have to convince people coastal resiliency is a problem. Blue tech is more widely adopted as a term, so we're past the awareness into adoption part of the scale, which makes these types of conversations on how to activate much easier. Which is where SIA Head operates as this platform for ocean innovation and open innovation, right? From the perspective of bringing together folks from MTS, from the private sector, from the aquarium, from the public sector, into this dialogue where we are, as a platform, supporting and accelerating companies and providing them with the resources they need to make that happen. But of course, as we all know, commercialization takes a lot of factors, which include both public and private and academic. So because we get to live in this essentially neutral territory, we're bringing together these stakeholders to really dig into the impetus for these conversations and how we can further the needs of the startups that we represent and the communities that we represent.
Well said. Thank you so much. Are there any explicit examples or bills that are currently on deck that you're particularly interested in or you're watching with your very careful eye because you believe that it's going to have a real impact?
Oh, well, I think we all heard Undersecretary talk about her desire and hope that we will pass the Economic Development Bond Bill.
Yes.
And that's probably the single biggest thing right now that we're hoping will come forward. I think we're probably about 10 or 12 significant investments in the green tech, the blue tech, and driving the innovation of the new sector. And it's things that you would expect. A lot of them, I think, are going to be more to sort of the bigger scale things than maybe the startups. But it's definitely tax credits, and it's grant funding through Mass CEC, and I'm trying to think of some other examples.
I actually have, the whole list here if anybody wants to see it afterwards. But
that's great.
we're looking at close to $1 billion in this economic bill, which I think will probably, right after the election, we'll probably end up going in and voting on it. But there is a lot of good things, from mass work grants to mass cultural funds to tourism, believe it or not, because it becomes tourism related as well.
Center of the Venn diagram,
Sure.
right?
Joan mentioned the Seaport Council. There's a lot of money in there for this. So there's so much. Yeah, there's so much in this whole thing. So if anybody wants to take a quick look at this afterwards, I'd be glad to show them.
That's great. And I'm thinking of, some of our other partners, Mass CEC, for example, they're in the process of standing up this innovation center in New Bedford, for example. So there are some infrastructure-related things that are going to yield similar to Plymouth, right? To you all being able to get this co-working facility up and running, which let me know if you want to chat about that. I'm happy to share some pro tips. But very, very excited to see that it's not just living in, to your point, large-scale, already existing in commercialization land, but also finding that we actually need to invest in place-making through space-making.
And I think the other piece that is important to mention is the financial innovation as well. And I think that's been a slightly slower piece to come.
Can you speak a little bit more about what you mean by that?
So the Healy administration actually, right at the top of session, created a climate bank, and they actually just did, the reason it's top of mind is they just did a big celebrating Climate Week on that. And what they're really trying to do is figure out how to get inexpensive money into the hands of regular people and small companies. If you're a financier, then you're banked, or if you own a big company or a big apartment building or your Hamilton Realty, you are banked. But the rest of us, how to get that inexpensive money, and they're just at the top of it now, starting to figure out how to make those financial and to mitigate some of the risks so that people like us and small companies and startups can actually start to borrow. And I think those are the kinds of innovations that are also going to
That's huge.
pair with that investments in physical infrastructure and with the programs that you're going to start seeing connect. So it's an exciting time right now.
That's fascinating. This is my other favorite part of being a participant as much as I am your facilitator today, is just that hopefully what you all are taking away from this conversation is like, this is a systems challenge, but it is a systems opportunity all the way down to the bank. That's incredible. All right, so let's pivot over to some of our more institutional and private industry folks. What are some of the challenges that you all are seeing within the startup community when they're attempting to interact with policy, regulation, or any of those other constraints, particularly in today's environment?
Sure. Happy to take a first pass at this. So technically, or often, startups are technologists and engineers and scientists. They are not policy people. It is hard to be all of the things and be really good at all of the things, right? I would say that, startups have a specific and unique expertise and they build up teams, but for them to have the wherewithal to understand the entire regulatory environment and how their technology is going to interact with all of these various aspects as they're growing a business. Also, let's say that climate and blue tech as tough tech industries are very, very hard. There's a long runway to commercialization, so it's hard to do everything, right? Which is where they need support. We have seen, specifically in the pathway to commercialization, once a startup has, and I think we heard from this from some of our other startups in the room today, getting access to putting things in the water and testing it in situ or in the environment is really tricky. Because permitting is this crazy black box that's really hard to understand as a layperson, never mind when you're a startup trying to navigate this, right? So regulation around permitting and getting access and knowing how to go through Chapter 91 and state waters versus federal waters, et cetera, it gets really tricky. So that's one aspect that we're seeing. Now, why does it matter? Because in order for a startup to show their commercial viability, they need to be able to test in the marine environment or in a coastal environment for long duration. That's how they're going to get through that big valley of death, right? So if there are resources to teach them about the regulatory and permitting environments, if there are resources for them to go talk to people to seek this information, and also thinking about collective action and collective bargaining where startups could perhaps come together and say, okay, these are our challenges, lawmakers, help us figure this out. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity in the challenge, but that in itself, just the permitting aspect of getting things into its in situ environment is one big challenge that they're facing.
Definitely. Anthony or Justin, anything you want to add?
Go ahead if you want.
Yeah, I would just, Haley nailed that. The navigation of the bureaucracy on both the state and local, the federal and local level can be immensely challenging for anybody. And here in Massachusetts, we've seen investments, for example, in the life sciences industry that's very broad, but we're still getting into this in the climate tech and blue tech space. So as we build out those spaces, it's going to become somewhat easier. But for the moment, this is all brand new and hard to navigate for anybody. So when you have when you're a small startup, without the resources and the knowledge of that government space, that can be immensely challenging.
I'm gonna tell a little story and segue maybe into your next question. But
Predictive.
great example of how policy and startups interact. Robot boats. Been working in my philanthropy life with a company that happens to be in Victoria, British Columbia. They have a specific regulatory regime through no fault of their own, except that they weren't paying attention to policy. Their permission to run their boats lapsed. I wanted them to send their boats to the Caribbean to do some good work. They were up against a shipping deadline. They couldn't finish testing their boats. Conveniently, if you're familiar with the Pacific Northwest, they're not very far from US waters, where, frankly, they had no constraints. So they simply dragged their robot boats across the border, finished their testing in waters, in Washington State, and then drove them back and then shipped them to the Caribbean. I bring this up in the context of, if you think about it from a public policy sector, That company in Canada is actually hamstrung by their regulatory regime. I won't get into it here, but the fact that their permit had expired was the least of their challenges in growing that business. They're working on it. Their public sector is trying to get together. But as you think about these things, the nature of blue technology businesses or the blue economy, being open-minded and trying to find flexibility and agility in public policy, creating playgrounds, test environments, spaces where, okay, maybe the rules are normally this, but we know those, like, we're not going to change the rules everywhere forevermore. We'll take our time there. But if we could just, like, relax the rules a little bit, like on Halloween, the kids can eat more candy than vegetables, right? Like, we need those opportunity sets to help these companies grow, and that's where I think the two sides of the equation can collaborate.
Well segued, sir.
I have one final thought for
Yeah,
you.
go ahead.
Which is that if regulation is generally created from a current standing of the world, right? We understand what stakeholders need, what communities need, industry, et cetera. But those things have to evolve over time because we have new technology and new understanding and new learnings about how to do things better, faster, more efficiently, et cetera, right? So there has to be this dialogue between these sides, right, where we can inform regulation to evolve to the current era. And I think that's where there could really be this platform for ways for startups to speak with and to regulators and have regulators, listen more into that so that we can create a dialogue because that's how we're gonna move faster and break things, right?
Love that. For our state representatives, any commentary on how do we reduce those barriers? What's the work before you all?
Well, I will just say that I think one of the things that's been helpful has been sometimes instead of having regulatory agencies, we create quasis.
Yes.
And I think Mass CEC has been a tremendous partner in exactly this kind of work because they can both make investments, but they can do technical technical assistance and things like that. They can give grants, and then I think because they bridge that gap, they also can act as a bridge across the divide. I mean, it really is a divide. But once you run afoul of DEP, it's kind of hard to come back sometimes with some of these regulators. But I will also point to, and I don't know if you guys agree with me or not, but the Coastal Caucus recently sat with Secretary Tepper and on the coastal resilience. And I think one of the other pieces is, it's not so much from us, but some of the larger initiatives that came out of the Baker administration and now are starting to come out of the Healy administration, like the coastal sustainability and coastal resilience. I mean, that's going to be real money, real projects, technical assistance, guidance, sharing information, and you just need. Somebody has to go first, which isn't always fun, but maybe North Shore will go first and then we can benefit. I don't know. I mean, Kathy, you've been sitting with these people and we got you were the one that organized that presentation. I don't know if you wanted to share more about the Coastal Caucus and the resilience, because I think that is another space where we can bring things to the administration as well.
I do. We're very fortunate that we have the Coastal Caucuses, our whole coast, and even people that just have our lakes and ponds, right? And what happens in the North Shore is different than happens in the South Shore, so we do get to collaborate. Secretary Tepper is fairly new. I think she was only on 6 months when she met with us, and she has a plan. She's a little overwhelmed, but just having that relationship with her, with the Coastal Caucus, is very helpful for us. She answered every question that we had. But you're right, it has to be a public-private partnership, not only with this, but with everything. Even if we bring in housing, it has to be public-private, or we're not going to get anything done.
Yeah.
And we have to have those conversations where we do collaborate.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think, but I agree with that, what you're saying, Kathy, but I do think in our own house,
Right.
and so we've got to get our act together,
Yep.
more so than what we've done. But I think the Coastal Caucus is the key place. And you co-chairing along with Bruce Tarr from the North Shore, and this is all Republicans and Democrats. This is not a partisan
No, it's
issue at all.
bipartisan.
It's really bipartisan, all working together from the North Shore, the South Shore, the Cape Cod. And I think that's going to be a conduit. So once we start, working through some of the economic development bills and some of these policies, then we can branch out and work with the industries in a better way.
It's also bridges House and Senate, which
Yeah, right.
we don't need
Yeah.
to talk about today. But
But that's a good thing.
that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Yeah.
Appreciate that. All right. Justin, this might be directly just for you. What signals are you seeing in the market, particularly maybe over the next 6 months, that you believe will inform future investment in marine-related companies?
Yeah, this one's actually quite easy. I can give you positive signals and negative signals, right? Negative signal, an unfortunate turbine blade falling off not far from here.
Yep.
Do not underestimate the lag that will put into not necessarily the whole industry, but the innovation side of that industry, right? So I'm trying not to be terribly pessimistic here, but wind offshore around here has been happening, I think, for longer than my kid who just turned 18 has been around, right? It's always felt like it's been happening and finally really started to happen. My kid finally started to get to be about 18 and may go off to college, right? But now I think there's more momentum there, right, than there is there. So don't underestimate that. And it's not that the big industry won't go, but the little folk, the smaller companies are going to be like, oh, crap. I was about to stick $500,000 into product development to go chase this market. It's now 2 years away before it's going to be real for me, right? So those things are important, and how we as a community react to them and message to them shapes the behavior of their investors and their management. Right? So, sorry, that's a bit of a negative. I'll give you a positive one that not everybody may love, but YouTube videos of the Ukrainians sinking the Russian Black Sea Fleet are exactly why there are now billion-dollar startups that are 2 years old, right? The defense, and by the way, as a sidebar, in ocean tech has always been driven by defense. Our friends in Rhode Island have a big Navy base. We're not as strong here in Massachusetts, but we are surrounded by defense-driven innovation, and it is absolutely true that has shaped so much of what we see in the blue tech sector, and that's really, really strong. The next one that is very, very fuzzy, but very, very exciting, relates to all facets of what I might call sort of a climate-focused blue economy. So you may hear talk of ocean or marine carbon dioxide removal. Ocean's going to save our bacon, pull the CO2 out of the atmosphere, everybody's going to be happy. That's like a 5 to 10 year problem. It might become a market, it might not, but if it does, it's going to be huge. The next one on that, and we talk about coastal resilience, the other buzzword is biodiversity, and there is money starting to flow around protecting biodiversity. Again, that's a little farther off, but these are places where we might start to see long-term big markets, and I bring that all up in a policy context because all those things I just talked, we could talk about some specific little markets, but those are big markets that are intimately involved with policy, right? And the policy side needs to get it right so that the investor side can grow the companies that serves that communal need of profit and planet.
Appreciate that. Anybody else? Anthony, Haley, if there's any other signals that you've been feeling spidey senses over?
Well, I don't know about market signals necessarily, but I think two things. One, on the policy space there, MCDR and biodiversity are big both on the federal and state level right now. Congress just held hearings on MCDR bills just maybe 4 weeks ago. House Natural Resources is set to release.
Can you say what that acronym means?
Marine carbon dioxide removal. And the White House is set to release a report later in the year. So I think as we go into the next Congress, that'll become a more pressing policy issue. On the state level, Fish and Wildlife is set to release its biodiversity report and some of the investments that they plan on making over the next remainder of the governor's term. So I think from a policy perspective, we see actually both of those things on the horizon. And then, of course, I think the biggest thing in the policy space is, regardless of outcome, there's going to be an administrative change in Washington in January, which will could change how we look at a lot of these investments moving forward.
It's been interesting to me, especially with my work at CIC, because we are very industry agnostic. Our mission is to change the world through innovation. At the end of the day, I sell office space. That is my product. But my office space brings people like this together, which is why I'm here. So we do a ton of work in the blue tech sector, but we also do a ton of work in the life science sector. And so as labs continues to become more and more of a burgeoning need. If you've got friends in Rhode Island, you know about the Rhode Island Life Science Hub and shared wet labs being a thing. There is a lot of money being held real tight right now. Everybody's hanging on and just waiting for the uncertainty of this election to pass. So one of the signals that I'm watching for across blue tech and other industries at large is seeing what money starts to flow again as we get to, say, like the end of Q1 of next year. I'm really excited to see what happens. There's been so much funding that feels like it's on pause because of all of these signals that we're currently having, even if it's just back of mind anxiety about. But I'm really looking forward to, say, like the first half of next year and seeing what lands in the laps of the people that are really driving so much different, like a wide variety of innovation. All right, last question, and then we're going to open it up to the room. So for all of you, anybody feel free to chime in first. How might we start working together in a better, more visible way? That is one thing I hear from my clients very often. I hear about policymakers talking to private industry people, but how might we make it more visible to our startups and our entrepreneurs so that these companies, our constituents, and the policy leaders can really continue to enable innovation?
I'll start with that. I think this is a start right here.
Yeah.
And I think, and I know it's going to be annual, but I almost think we need to somehow kickstart this up more so that there are more often, and maybe subgroups come out of this or something.
Right.
That could actually happen. But I think, once we, as I said, get our house in order with economic development bill, I think the first half, as you talked about, the first quarter, first half,
Right.
We really need to have another one of these somehow with, us and the industry as well to start those conversations.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Anybody else?
Oh, I agree 100%. I
Yeah,
think that
I agree.
economic development bond bill is going to be, is really going to be significant. And a lot of people are waiting to see, because that's the state of Massachusetts sending its market signals. I mean, we've already said we're going to be doing our carbon reduction emission goals. I mean, that for 2050, that's 30 years of planning. And I know there's some selectmen and planning board members in here, and I mean, we usually do 1 year budgeting. Even the state only does 1 year budgeting, and it's really hard to commit to things when town meeting can only bind you for 1 year.
Right.
And you get a new select board, and then out it goes. So it's really, I think from the state's perspective, how we send those big economic expectations, and I think what you're really saying is spot on, Matt. We're creating an ecosystem, right? That's what we're really trying to do is create that ecosystem for an innovation economy. And we just happen to be talking about the blue economy here, but that's really, I think, when the Healy administration and what Secretary's remarks were earlier about are really about doing that. And quite frankly, I think there's so much investment's already been made. It feels like it's very fertile, and I'm looking to see if I'm getting smiles from our industry partners, but it does.
Not so much.
Not so much, but maybe after the election, once you said that it really starts to the money starts to flow again. But I think it's a fertile ecosystem, and quite frankly, I'm sitting on a sort of the northernmost shore of the county, and I'm very excited, and I love that you're doing this, and I want to see you guys be bold, be audacious, and really start to think about, you're reimagining. Plymouth is Plymouth, but you're reimagining what your opportunity is, and I think that's what's exciting about all of this. So I say, be bold, be audacious, and go for it, because we don't know every damn thing. So we'll take our cues from you.
What do you look at me for?
Well said, Joan.
Because you're sitting next to me.
Amazing. Anyone else on the panel?
As you can tell, we're really anxiously awaiting for this bill to pass, and I'm optimistic that it will before the end of the year. But we have to start with our younger generation as well. So I filed legislation for DESE to put a Blue Economy Education Fund together, which I think is great, and that is going to have funding to expand educational and development, workforce training, and job placement. I don't have my glasses on, so I really can't see this. Programs into the blue economy. So, if we start with our younger generation, it will be conversations at the dinner table, right? That's where it begins at the dinner table.
How many of you remember the Earth Day campaigns of the 80s? Like, I'm here on this stage because of those campaigns.
Right.
That's right.
So we have to take, that's what I love about this moment in time, is that we've learned from the previous administration and its $1 billion investment into life science, and how might we apply those same lessons to climate tech and blue tech? How might we take those positive moments from the past, like Little Earth Day, and bring it to our young folks in order to expose them? I was talking to Nishita earlier today, who runs Tribe Academy and all of these other wonderful things, but she and I often talk about like just getting students exposed to what is possible matters so much in what we do.
Yeah. And I know in talking with Stephen Cole earlier, that, you know, the students here earlier today, but next year we're talking about already about making it a whole day.
Right.
Because, you know, we have a lot of tech programs around, particularly in Plymouth, we have a tech program and around the area as well. And if we could add this as a major driver for the youth, that would be so much.
I love that.
That goes a long way for the future.
Fantastic.
So you're talking, there's two things being said. We're talking about an economic development bill, and we're talking about, you know, young people. And the interesting thing to me is they both suffer from the same problem. So until I sat down here, I really wasn't tracking any economic development bill. I live in the state. I pay a lot of taxes to this state. Completely clueless, let alone was I thinking about how it might impact blue tech businesses in any city, town, or region, right? So big opportunity to close a disconnect, get the bill passed. You're asking how to do it visibly. There's some conveners here, whether it's the aquarium, See Ahead. I have a local section of MTS. Like, when it's ready, we can certainly work on closing that gap.
Right.
And that is the same problem that you have with most issues of employment in sort of the blue economy. But I would go so far as to say we should probably think beyond just the blue economy, right? So great article recently about HVAC businesses getting bought up by private equity.
Yeah.
Right, I've been trying to convince my daughter that she should just become a plumber or an electrician. She's not.
She's really excited about that.
She's not
I
on
bet.
board with that plan, right? But it's that same dynamic, like those same kinds of jobs and skills, right? An HVAC technician is very similar to a wind farm technician,
Right.
is very similar to a future of fish farm technician, right? So the positive note here is there's a lot of opportunity to close these gaps and raise awareness. And to your point about visibility in the question, right, I think that's where I start to struggle, because we can take a policy community and an ocean economy community and we can talk, but then I'm sure there's some other voices and some other audiences we need to become more nuanced on.
That's a
And I
great point.
rapidly run out of expertise there, but I think we should make sure this is a great group. There's probably people missing,
Yeah.
or organizations.
Certainly.
That's very true.
And some of our education partners as well. Like my background long before CIC was in tech, and the last place I worked before I joined CIC was actually edX. And so we were talking at length about like, how do we create career pathways that, Justin, to your point, are very clear and crisp to people, that you're like, if you have these, if you're looking at these specializations, these are actually applicable here, here, and here. So how do we develop more career-laden education that makes it visible about what's possible? Amazing. All right, folks. Who has a question for this fine, fabulous panel? Thank you so much. Stand up and say your name and say your question loud and clear.
So I'm Sheila Vaughn, I'm the Director of Admissions at Cape Cod Community College. I figured it's a great opportunity because we were just talking about that. So as educational, I come here every year, this is my third year here, and I have to say every year I learn so much more and bringing it back to the college and to our economy. We have the blue economy, degree. Like, what is that? What does that mean, right? But we also have our aviation maintenance, and we have our, and now it's free, so community college is free. And so it really is like we want to bring it in, but having those students be able to have the pathways to have a career and stay here and live here. And what does that mean? They have to have jobs that can sustain living here and paying rent and being able to have a house and having, the cost. Like, I can't live off of $40,000 a year, right? So it's like getting those jobs and having sustainable jobs that they can have with maybe a 2-year education or having a certificate or a pathway. And, I think that's really important. We live off of the fishermen and all that, but there's so many job opportunities, and just looking at you all today, just knowing what my students can do in their career pathways, seeing those students here today and talking to them all this morning, those 2 hours, there's so many students that want to be a plumber and an electrician, I'm not going to lie, but they were, wanting to be engineers, and they want to do aerospace, and like, what do I do? Where do I start? What do I do? And I think having those discussions with the policy leaders too, that's so important, and with the tech, and knowing you have job opportunities for them too, because that's what they need, right? So that's where we have to have that conversation for our students to say, they want to stay here. They just need you guys to know what they have.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much. Anyone else? Yes.
I'm going to piggyback because I'm Massasoit.
All right. Education.
Right, because what we really need from industry is to recognize that our associate graduates are the ones that are living here, are the ones who want to invest here. You don't have to find them homes, they've got homes. But we need your help to be able to really craft the right kinds of skill sets and the right kinds of credentials and the right kind of internships that are associated with our associate degrees to get them placed and have you have the respect for them because they come from community college and because they're associate skilled people and not bachelor's degrees from MIT. They can eventually get there too. They're just as smart. They just have other lives that they're doing. So we really love to be a part of those partnerships so that we can hear from all of you what we can do to strengthen our degrees to give you what you're looking for.
Love that. Thank you so much. Man, Stephen, I don't know if we can take any more questions after that. That was so damn good. It was like you both were plants. Thank you so much. We did that on purpose, everyone.
Maybe
We definitely
Quincy
did that.
College is there.
Exactly.
What do you think, guys? Is that a good way to end it?
I think so.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, can we hear for our panel and our facilitator?
Thank you all so much.
At the same time next year?
Yes.
All right.
You got it. Get this out of your way.
Well,
Vote
folks,
on November 5th. Vote.
that too. Well, I think that is a great way to conclude today's activities, except there's one more event that you have to look forward to, Ugly Fish and Networking. Last year, we did this for the first time. Mike Cahill introduced the idea and the concept. Mike's over there. You've heard his name a few times today. We build on the concept every year, though, so we're keeping Ugly Fish, and we're going to have a very special presentation on sea serpents, but we're giving away our very first STEAM award to Keith Ellenbogen, so please, if that's not enough of a reason to come celebrate Keith at the terrace at 150 Water Street. Before I let you go, I received some praise today from some of you, and I deserve some of it. I'll take some of it, but the fact remains, so much work goes into a conference like this. It's not just the panelists, it's not just the facilitators, it's the Michelle Pecoreros of the world. She's the reason why you're all here for the most part, because she kept you very well informed. Did she not?
She did.
Did she not? I want your feedback, though. Every year, we're committed to continuous improvement. Many of you know how to find me already. If you don't, just pull me down at the networking event. But we want to hear your feedback, because next year, we want to democratize this. We're starting planning in January, okay? So pretty much as soon as this conference is done, we're focusing on next year. I want to thank you all for coming. I'll see you all down at 150 Water Street.
And tomorrow.
Oh, and tomorrow, you better be here. Breakfast is being served at what time, Michelle? 8:30. 8:30, breakfast is being served. Thank you, everyone. See you in the morning.